Welcome to the first episode on politics, religion, and coffee. I've got a steaming, hot, piping hot cup of coffee I'm getting ready to partake from. Oh God, that's amazing. It's dark. It's late. Everyone's in bed but me. And I thought we'd do a little bit of a deep dive. Maybe not as deep as you're used to on some other channels, but I do want to say that I wanted to start with this. It's called TALF. TALF. Term Assisted Backed Securities Loan Facility. And if you look on the screen, it was a funding facility that helped market participants meet the credit needs of households and small businesses. There's a lot to it. If you want to go on this website yourself, I'll put a link in the description. Good luck trying to find anything on this website because it is the Federal Reserve website, and they've learned very well from the government on how to bury information. But I would suggest that you go to this website, which is projectspropublica.org. It'll be in the description. And this particular one shows the failed bailout investments. The biggest thing that I wanted to point out tonight, and to be honest with you, there are certain people in the government today whose family may or may not have profited from TALF or TALF. I won't mention those too much tonight, but it's worth looking into. All I know is that the Washington Examiner had a very interesting piece on Hunter Biden and how his former company, Rosemont investment firm, got quite a bit of money from TALF. Now, I don't know what you consider a small business. I don't know what you consider a small business, but let's take a look at some of this. Oh, and by the way, if you'd like to research this yourself, the government actually defines what a small business is. Sometimes it's defined by how many people are there, depending on what kind of industry you're in. Sometimes it's defined by how much profit you make. But there is a cap. However, the Federal Reserve reserved the right, that's kind of funny, reserved the right to give out loans to whom they deemed necessary. So let's talk about some of these. Let's start right here at Anchor Bancorp of Wisconsin. It was a bank, public. You could click on this if you wish, and you could see some more information. But they took $110 million. They returned $6 million. They didn't have any dividends plus interest paid back, and they still owe the American public $104 million. $104 million. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't want to try to influence your opinion. I would like for you to look at it yourself. Doesn't seem much like a small business to me. You could keep going. There's Chrysler, the auto company. You can see here how much money they were dispersed, how much money they paid back, and how many dividends plus interest that they paid back. And then, of course, there's the other proceeds tab. But looks like they still owe the American taxpayers $1,212,849,005. Unfortunately, for you and me, the companies that were in our area, whatever area you're from, whether it be Detroit, or whether it be a small town in Wisconsin, or a small town in Virginia, or all over this country, in 2009, we watched our small businesses collapse. And while that was happening, banks and auto companies got most of the money. I know that everybody listening to this knows that. But once you see the numbers, it's pathetic. It's sickening. Makes you want to vomit in your face, to be honest with you. It's ridiculous. the amount of money that the federal government, taxpayer money, allowed the Federal Reserve to loan to companies that did not pay it back. On this website, actually, if you want the truth, you can go to the homepage, recipients, programs, all that stuff. It was last updated January of 2020. If we go really quickly back to the Federal Reserve Board, it says right here that the final outstanding TALF loan was repaid in full October 2014. That is true. That's true. But how could that be if all these outstanding loans are still out? Look at this. General Motors. This makes me sick. I mean, $11 billion they owe the taxpayers. I didn't see any of that money. I know that the companies that left our area didn't see any of that money. Small businesses, GM is a small business. I shouldn't say that. I should let you decide for yourself. But I think you can see my point. This tends to happen with government programs. It starts off as something that sounds really good for the people involved. I mean, hey, who wouldn't have said back in 2009, hey, could we not do a loan or something with a small interest loan to the American people, their own tax money and these small businesses that are out there to keep them from going under? Because let's be honest, if you go by basic economics, and I'm not an economist, but they will tell you that the middle class are the ones that buy everything. The middle class is where you get your consumers from. Yet the middle class were one of the hardest hit during the 2009 debacle. I'm not going to go into all of the politics surrounding it, but once again, if you look on the internet and just type in Hunter Biden and Washington Examiner, you will find a very interesting hit piece there. But I don't want to stay with just that, because this was not just something that was proposed by the Democrats. It was also very much wanted by the Republicans. And George W. Bush had done something very similar to this with TARP. Barack Obama came in and he extended it. So if you're interested in that, you might want to do a deep dive, but I'll tell you, it's going to take you some time. Some of the things that I've learned over the last few days have taken me a long time. Let's get back on topic here. I wanted to show you this. On the home page, and it may take a minute to load, so we'll talk for a second. On the home page, it breaks down where the money went. And when it breaks down where the money went, right here it is, the state of the bailout, $633.6 billion. This is the money that has actually been spent, invested, or loaned. 38.7% of that total went to banks and other financial institutions. 30.2% went to Fannie and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I know you've heard of that, but just to explain, that was those were government institutions. They bailed themselves out of trouble. Then auto companies got about 12.6, AIG got about 10.7, other 4.9, who knows what the other was, and toxic assets purchased 2.9%. Now, maybe I'm just looking at this the wrong way, but wouldn't it have made more sense if the problem was that banks were allowing toxic asset loans? Wouldn't it make more sense to just buy up the toxic asset loans? In other words, wouldn't it have been more beneficial to either turn around and take the $63.6 billion and give it back to the American people, the consumer, let them go out and spend the money? I know that some people are going to say that sounds socialist, but the point is, it was our money to begin with. So why did we not just send us a check in the mail and say, here, go spend this, instead of bailing out these corporations? Less corporations would have failed. Some people would have went to banks and they would have invested. The middle class would have spent. And in my opinion, the recession would have lasted a lot less long, or not as long, pardon my lack of English skills, if something like that would have happened. Let's look at the breakdown here, okay? The breakdown, this is where it gets real. Remember, I told you that the loans had been paid back, or that the balance on the loan had been paid back. That's true. You had $634 billion that was dispersed. You had $390 billion that got returned. The total revenue from dividends and interest and other fees, $364 billion. In other words, the total net to date, that it was July of 2020, the total net, $121 billion. In other words, we did get a surplus. However, if everybody that owed the government money, taxpayers, their money back, paid it back with interest, we'd be sitting on a pretty hefty sum. But here's the big problem about that. I went over all this to really get to this point. You and I would have never seen a dime of that money. It was not meant for you and me. It was not meant for small businesses. It was meant for friends and family of people inside the government and others who had lawyers that could take advantage of the situation to get free money from the federal government and, for the most part, not pay it back. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that went on back then, and it leads us up into today. Some of the same key players that decided this was a good idea are still in the news today. Some of the key players may or may not have had roles outside the government. Some of the key players may or may not have friends and family that work for them who get paid large sums of money for working for them. Interestingly enough, this is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is a government problem. Federal Reserve, to be exact, but not just the Federal Reserve, the government in general. The truth is, we send our tax money to the government, and really their job is to protect us from foreign invaders. That's about it. Not tell us what we can do with our day-to-day lives or anything of that nature. Now, there are some other things that are specified by the United States Constitution, but in reality, let's get real. We don't need them telling us what to do. We don't need them to regulate another law, because every stroke of the pen is one less freedom that you and I have. So maybe you're of the mind that I'm the kind of person that is for small government. Well, you might want to get to know me a little bit better. I'm not necessarily for a weak government, but when you start looking at stuff like this is complete and total corruption. Complete and total. Absolute corruption. And we saw it with our own eyes. And yet we went right back to the ballot box and voted the same jokers right back in for the most part. Because you could sit there and say, well, I didn't vote for them. I voted for the Tea Party. I voted for this. I voted for that. What you voted for was Republicans and Democrats. That's what you voted for. We have a two-party system here in the United States. And even though the Tea Party did make some headway, they were totally usurped by the Republican Party. Absolutely. And they made us look crazy. They made us look stupid. They told us we were racist and everything else. So there you go. That's what you get. You can't sit here and tell me, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an economist. But you can't sit here and tell me that all this money just magically dissipates into the atmosphere and we get no return on it whatsoever. Let me just put it to you this way. The people in Congress couldn't balance a checkbook. Well, I take that back. They can balance a checkbook as long as it's their own checkbook. But they can't balance the country's checkbook. They can't balance a budget. They can't agree on anything. Meanwhile, they keep taking our tax dollars. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And just so I can speak to all the audience, hopefully there's quite a few people that will listen to this It'd be really nice. But even if they don't, whether you think the money should have been spent on healthcare, or whether you should think the money should have been given back to the people, or whether you think it should have been spent on defense or any of the other things that are popular to talk about right now, it does not matter. The fact of the matter is it was wasted. For the vast majority of it was wasted. $121 billion, that's not wasting, you might say. You don't think so? The total net to date is $121 billion. What about the money that we'll never get back? We will never absolutely get it back. That could have been gained from interest. And it's the principle of the thing. Yes, we got our money back because we have an excess. We have the $121 billion. But did it actually make anything better? Did it change the fact of what was going on? I don't think so. And I don't think you guys are dumb enough to believe it either. I would encourage everyone out there to go and do their own deep dive of their own. But be very careful. Be careful indeed. The inner workings of the federal government is a giant black hole. And just remember, once you get stuck in a black hole, you don't come back out. It swallows everything, including light. So be very careful, because what you're going to find, it leads to more and more and more and more. Just as an aside, on the next episode, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on Hunter Biden, only because he's going to be in the news pretty soon. There's a really great expose that The Intercept did on him. Obviously, I can't show that for copyright reasons, but I've been taking notes on it, and it's really, really interesting because it's been downplayed a whole lot in the mainstream media. But you'll be interested to find out some of this stuff. But anyway, have a great night and keep drinking that coffee, baby. I'm going to take a swig myself. Good night.